Hello folks and welcome to Our Game with myself, Shane Stapleton, joined today by Nickey Brennan, former GA president, former Kilkenny hurler, footballer, you name it, Nickey's done it. How are things with you, Nickey?
Yeah, good, Shane, not too bad at all, thanks.
Yeah, look, busy times in GA at the moment. I'd say you're getting your fill of it, are you, between covering matches?
I've been at quite a number of matches. Obviously, I was up at Congress last weekend as well. You're invited back to Congress as a former president, but other than complaining about the difficulty of getting tickets, all the I can't say too much, to be honest, but sat in on the finance workshop and just generally said hello to people I hadn't seen for a long time.
Yeah, and do you enjoy those sort of occasions? Do you like still having that?
I don't want to get very much involved anymore, to be honest about it. It's nice to sit down and talk to people and hear what's going on and realise, to be fair, the challenges that are there at the moment. I actually, on Friday afternoon, I went into the finance workshop and it was like very, very good presentations given by people from Croke Park. I must say, I'm very impressed by them. But I think what it brought home to me was that the scale of the GA has always been needed to be run on a kind of a business type basis, but the amount of business to speak around governance and strategy and controls and issues like that are very strong at the moment. And the GA has no choice but to ensure strong compliance in these areas because it could have issues getting government money or things like that. But the pressure that's putting on our elected officials and indeed our paid officials who are running as administrators or management at county board level, it's absolutely huge. And to fit on that, and particularly, and as I say, into the volunteer environment, it's very, very difficult. And I just feel for people at inter-county level are trying to run the whole scene, and indeed club level for that matter, because club level is a mirror image of county level, albeit that the figures are a little bit smaller, but the challenges are there. So I don't envy club officers and county board officers the challenges that they're faced nowadays. And we all know that at inter-county level, the cost of running the inter-county team has just rocketed now to such an extent that it's pretty much gone out of hand. So I don't envy those county board officials who have a lot on their plate at the moment. It's tough out.
And up and down through the different levels of GA, even if we come to something like refereeing and what happened last night. So in recent months, we've had the Gaelic Referees and Officials Association being founded. It's not recognised by the GA. And then last night, you're seeing these stories come out. There's a meeting in Malahide at a hotel, and there's obviously, people obviously aren't getting on. A firearm is allegedly brandished. Now, you're hearing that, it's an imitation gun, another way, you're hearing different stories. It's all alleged at this moment in time. But that'll just tell you that there are issues at every level of GA. I mean, I've been playing hurling in Dublin for 14 years, managing for the last 2 years. Referees are absolutely crucial and you need to make sure they're looked after. But this Gaelic Referees and Officials Association, which was featured on Primetime a couple of months ago, Nickey, it's very hard to talk about last night's incident, but that association is dead in the water now, surely.
I was aware of the incident until you spoke to me before we came on air here. So obviously, if what you're saying, if the alleged incident happened, obviously it's a very serious matter. But one way or the other, there's a refereeing body in every county. There's a refereeing group who look after referees. There's a national referees body. I think there's plenty of fora in which referees can make representation and where they're looked after. There was no need for this independent body. I don't know the people involved in it, but certainly I think that their future has to be gravely in doubt at this stage, if indeed it ever even got off the ground. But you're right. I mean, referees have to be looked after. I do think there's a decent structure in every county. And the bottom line is that it's county boards, to be fair, are putting a fair effort to try and make sure they're properly looked after. And if there are incidents, at county level or at club level, it's up to the respective bodies and authority to make sure they just lay down the law very quickly and bring the perpetrators to justice.
And it's like most of this was referees within Dublin. That's where it started out. Is there consistency across the board in terms of how county boards deal with their referees in terms of the expenses they get, or is every county board their own island?
Well, I'd say there probably is now. There would be a fairness to county boards in general, and I'm a little bit out of touch with matters now. But I would say in general that county boards are regularly liaised with one another. They meet at provincial level, of course, and at national level. And there's a lot of comparing what do you do or type of thing. So I think there's a fair bit of consistency there. I mean, would referees like to get a few more bob? Of course they would like to get a few more bob. But are they being, I think they're being probably adequately looked after at the moment. But if that can't prove them, County will make an effort to do it. So I do think, by and large, that when it comes to look after referees, they're pretty well looked after. I mean, the problem we have, and it's not just with Gaelic games, the problem we have is getting enough of match officials, to be honest about it. Other sports are having similar type challenges, because ultimately that's very much the volunteering stages they're at, and albeit they get a few bob expenses because they have to drive to venues and manage the game that way.
Yeah, so I suppose like there's some big fixtures on this weekend, a lot of matches to really sink our teeth into. We might start off with Kilkenny going to visit Clare at Cusack Park. Really and truly, you'd think that Brian Lohan would want to set the record straight a little bit for what happened in the 2022 and 2023 All-Ireland semi-finals. Like a victory over Kilkenny would be good for him and his panel.
Well, Brian Lohan has done, last time Kilkenny were down in Clare, Clare won as well. So Clare don't have a bad record against Kilkenny in the league. What you're referring to is the championship that he certainly wants to rectify, and he may very well get a chance later in the summer. But the problem with playing a match in the early part of March is that both teams are still in the I won't call it the trial stakes, but there's players injured, and there's quite a number of players still out from both teams. So you're not going to be looking at the formations that are going to be there if the teams are going to be playing in the month of June, July, or whatever it might be, or even August. Well, sorry, it won't be August, but July, you should say.
Yeah, but like in terms of... No, go ahead.
Obviously, Kilkenny we still have to see the Kilkenny captain, Paddy Deeg, back in act this year. And Derek has been trying out a lot of different players in different positions. And he probably has to get to the stage at this stage where he's only got one more game left in the league now, that's against Waterford. And he probably needs to start putting some sort of a shape on the team. The word coming out this week is that Walter Walsh, who may not have been a starter, but he's gone now for maybe the best part of 10 weeks with an injury. So that's going to impact coming into the championship. Now, I saw Walter as being hugely influential this year, and hopefully he still will be that way. So we do need to see Paddy Deeg, and hopefully he'll be picked to play on Sunday against Clare. But then Clare have a lot of players missing, with Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, just to mention two. I know there's quite a number of more. So Brian is in a situation where he has to continue to experiment to some extent and realise that he has a couple of big players to come back. But if you don't get an awful lot of game time, even the best of hurlers, and Tony Kelly and Shane O'Donnell are very much in that bracket of the best of hurlers, if they haven't got a reasonable amount of game time behind training, coming into a Munster Championship is no place to be coming in if you're not well prepared.
And from what you've seen of Kilkenny so far this year, 2 wins and a draw from 3 games, and there was 6 points behind against Offaly at home at Nolan Park. I'm sure there was plenty of people in the ground scratching their head at that stage. But more broadly speaking, what do you make of what you've seen so far?
The first game against Wexford, I suppose, was always going to try to two of them bring out the best in one another. They had actually meeting just a week earlier in the Welsh Cup in Callan, which Wexford won, and both teams didn't work at full strength, but Kilkenny were down a little bit more. But when it came to the match, it could have gone away now, to be honest about it. I was impressed by Wexford. I was impressed by their work rate and the effort they put in. But Kilkenny did well to come back and draw the match, and it could have really gone either way in the end. The match against Cork in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, again, for the first half, failed to show. For 25 minutes, they were being well out-hurled by Kilkenny, made a bit of a comeback. It just obviously it was tight at the end, and it could really have gone either way. Patrick Horgan had a shot on goal that he might have tapped in. Kilkenny missed a couple of chances as well. But it was a big win for Kilkenny down in Cork, and against Offaly the last day. Kilkenny were totally out of sorts in the first half. Offaly were very impressive. But there was a very strong wind chain in that game that day. And I think we all expected Kilkenny to come back. And I spoke to Johnny Kelly after the match, and he absolutely agreed with me that the game just fell away from them literally within the first 2 or 3 minutes. Offaly needed to hold the second half for 5 minutes, possibly play a sweeper, and Kilkenny within 1 minute had scored 2 points. And the momentum was very much gone Kilkenny's way at that stage. And Offaly did look as if they were falling away, but they made a decent effort at the end, clawed back to ones of the 7-point margin or something at the end. And I was impressed enough by Offaly, but I think John, after the game, he was a manager who was frustrated that they didn't kind of hold Kilkenny early in the second half. And had they done that, they might have just built up a little bit more momentum. But with the wind in their favour, Kilkenny were we're always going to be serious players in the second half. But we're not in the first.
So just in terms of how they've played so far, is there an inconsistency within games? Because if we were so critical, and I think across the board everyone was hugely critical of Cork for that first 20-25 minutes against Kilkenny, but that they came so close to overhauling the Cats towards the end, would you point to some big inconsistency within Kilkenny in that game? And then obviously the Jekyll and Hyde performance against Offaly, I know you talked about it there a little bit, but that was far from perfect either. So, but do you put that down also to the likes of TJ Reid not being there yet, and you're like, okay, we'll accept that for now?
Look, that's part of it, but let's go back to the other end. I mean, Rick has been trying players. We've had, Dara Corcoran has played full back. Hugh Lawler has played full back. I think Tommy Welsh was in there full back. Various players have played at centre back as well. So there's been an inconsistency. Part of it brought out by the fact that Auckland Gales got to the club final, so he didn't want to overstretch those players, and that's the reason Paddy Dean was trying to get over a niggly injury. But it's been he brought in Jordan Malloy at left half back, was doing very well, and then he got a hand injury, so he's out of action for a period. So he's been very unfortunate in trying to put on a skill team, and I know he wants to try out players, but the trying out is going to have to start in the stop stage. And I mean, there was a very good tweet there on the screen a moment ago about this weekend could be a kind of a real, this could set the pace on what's going to happen in the league, and it will. I think that's a good statement by that texter there. But when it comes to Kilkenny, I mean, the standout player for Kilkenny throughout this league has been Adrian Mullen. I mean, he's twice nominated for Player of the Week, and he absolutely is reveling in a kind of while playing half forward, he's playing in a very free role. I mean, that means he's leaving the challenge to his marker or markers to follow him wherever he goes. And I mean, at times in match against Offaly, he was down in the corner back position for pulling the ball out there and helping out in defence. So he's liking this roving role. He's landing 4, 5, 6 points per game, and he has absolutely become the go-to player for Kilkenny at this stage. But we do need to see a better functioning attack. It has not going well. Certainly without Adrian Mullen, I think Kilkenny would not be on. They're on 5 points at the moment and head up 1A at this stage. They're a 4-point better margin than Clare. But I think without Adrian Mullen, that would not have been the case. And he needs some of his colleagues to step up at this stage. And Derek is good. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Kilkenny team will be against Clare now, because Martin Keoghan hasn't been playing consistently. He's a guy I'd personally be shoving in at full forward. We're mentioning TJ, but I think we just need to chill out a bit towards TJ this year. I mean, TJ will still be an influential player, but I mean, he's 36 years of age. He's looked after himself exceptionally well, and it's unfair and unreasonable that we think TJ is just going to turn games the way he's always done it in the past. That's not reasonable at this stage. The go-to player for Kenny now is Adrian Mullen, and he's the guy we need to make sure is not injured. And we need to, again, get something into our midfield. We just haven't a consistent midfield. Mikey Carey is out there, and hopefully, I'm not sure what that query is there, as you can read the chain in a moment, but Mikey Carey has been altering between a half-back and centre. Just started midfield the last day, switched with Dara Corcoran against Offaly. So again, Derek has an awful lot of kind of issues and his selectors as to where he's going to play people. So it's a very unsettled Kilkenny team in many respects. But we just have to wait and see. This weekend will be a very important win this weekend. And Kilkenny are probably, in a strong position to get to the closing stages of the league. Lose this weekend and they just might get sucked back into the situation. And of course, we should remember that this year's league, where you finish, is going to determine what group you're in next year. Now, as I see it at the moment, 1B is probably done and dusted in the sense that Limerick, Tipp and Galway are pretty certain to be in 1A next year. It's not as clear in the other group because there's 5. The only team I think right now that possibly are not going to make it there are Offaly. The other teams, even though Waterford and Wexford and Cork are on 2 each, there's a battle going on there for possibly that 4th spot. I think the 4th spot is more likely to come out of 1A. But the teams that are in that position need to show cause this weekend. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that's going. And I mean, Kilkenny and Clare, Wexford have 3 points from 3 draws. they wouldn't be absolutely assured either. So everybody has something to play for. If Wexford were to beat Waterford this weekend, it would put Waterford's participation in 1A next year. It might put a bit of a question mark over it.
Yeah, it certainly would. Do you know, the question that came in there from Colm Lyons Blind Spot was talking about Adrian Mullen. Is he a half forward or a midfielder? Like, I would say that he's a bit of a roaming player, could probably play anywhere really, but has he always roamed like this, Nickey? Maybe you want to directly answer, is he a midfielder or a half forward, but has he always been good at roaming?
Adrian Mullen wants to play half forward. He doesn't want, if he's a mid, he has freedom to do things as a half forward, I think. And maybe not, as a midfielder, maybe he's more obliged to put on a defensive role. But as a half forward, he can roam wherever he wants and let the marker worry about where he is, and he can do things. And the other thing as well is if Mullen is on the ball, he has great vision. He's particularly when he gets the ball, watch the way unknown Cody will run into space to expect that pass. And a few scores already in this league have come up because of, okay, they're club players with Shamrocks Ballyhale, of course, that's a big factor. But I think Kilkenny get the most out of Adrian Mullen, probably as a half forward. But there's plenty in Kilkenny. The listener there is on the ball. There's plenty in Kilkenny who could see him as a midfielder. In fact, Shane, I'll go so further, there's plenty who might see him as a centre half, in fact. But I think for now, it needs to be half forward in that roving role because he's able to bring others into the game apart from his scoring himself. And he can wander back around midfield, half back, if and when he feels that's necessary also. He has that freedom. And I think that's what he likes at the moment.
And I suppose just before I ask you a little bit more about Clare, on Monday's show, Michael Verney was talking about that production line that Kilkenny have had for years, going all the way from DJ to Shefflin to Eddie to Richie Hogan to Richie Power to TJ Reid, you name it. It went on for a long, long spell, and it always felt like there was some player coming, even Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen in more recent years. And he was sort of suggesting that this has dried up a little bit. And I'm just wondering, is there sort of, I obviously don't have to name kids here, this guy's coming or whatever, because, that's not fair either. But do you feel like there is that production line of stars coming again, like lads who can turn water into wine?
On that moment, they're not as obvious as the names you reeled off. When those guys were coming through the scene, you could say these are guys that are going to make it. Now, when we look at that, I suppose one of the things you look at to see if there's something happening is what's in St. Kieran's. Now they probably have, I'd say, close to the best team I've seen in quite some time, going to Croke Park on Saturday week to take on St. Raphael's of Loughrea in the colleges final. But the big question is, could I say some of those lads jumping out and becoming automatic as Kilkenny senior players? Probably not at this stage, but I think they might make. There could be a possibility. Those and some of last year's winning team as well through the Kilkenny under-20s. But bear in mind that aside from the All-Ireland that Kilkenny won against Limerick 2 years ago at under-20, I mean, we just haven't been figuring in the underage scene at minor or under-20. And look, there was a touch of fortunate about that Limerick win because we played the first game against, we played Offaly in the first game, a very poor game in UPMC Nolan Park. We then travelled to Tullamore to take on Galway. And Galway did not have access to Tiernan Killeen and Gavin Lee, two guys that are currently on Henry's panel. Henry played in a match against Westmeath. And at that stage, once you played, you were gone. So had those two guys available to Galway that evening, I'm not sure Kilkenny would have won the match. Now, we subsequently went on to the Leinster final and played Wexford, who had to stand down Oisin Pepper. And we won that very narrowly. And then up against Limerick, they didn't have Paul O'Neill and I think Adam English. So while it was brilliant to win the OT, we have to caveat the win with these. And that maybe is unfair to the players and Derek because they did improve all through that campaign. But I think we have to be realistic. And it is from that 20s now that he's hoping to get a few players. He has Brennan getting a good bit of game time. Garrod Dunn was injured over the Christmas. He's back again here now. Harry Shine was on the panel. Not sure if he's still on the panel now. So there's a number of those players that he was looking forward to kind of making the breakthrough. But I'm not sure they're ready for it yet at this stage. So, what Michael Berry said there is probably a fair point. That train that was bringing so many stars in the past is not moving as well as it did in previous years. And it does open up a bit of challenges for Kilkenny. I mean, you had the unusual situation last year of where Tom Phelan came on to the Kilkenny scene in a big way. And Tom is 27 or 8. No, unfortunately for Tom at the moment, and it's a big loss to Kilkenny. He's out injured at the moment with an injury. And but Kilkenny going for a 26 or 7 or 8-year-old maybe wouldn't have been heard of. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's often you'll find these players who for 2 or 3 years, they just might be able to fill a particular position. And 2 or 3 years might be the length of their inter-county career. They can deliver big time during that period. So what?
And in terms of Clare, like you look at their form in the league so far, and it's been pretty good considering Tony Kelly isn't there. Shane O'Donnell has been held back till the championship. John Conlon wasn't thrown in immediately. Obviously, he had an extended season with Clonlara. Are you impressed? Like, it does feel like their window is closing now because some of these players are 30 plus, but they're still right there.
Clare are still very competitive. I mean, I think I'm looking forward to the game on Sunday. And down in Ennis and see how Kilkenny will respond, because they're playing very well down there. I mean, the number of players. I mean, Mark Rogers in particular had a great season at colleges as well, and he's played very well. And a number of more players have come off of under 21 teams over the last couple of years. And Brian Lohan and his colleagues seem to have they've obviously brought them on very well. Now, there's a caveat always during the course of the league, because managers are always reluctant to throw everybody. They want to hold people back if there's a bit of a niggly injury, because you're running straight to the championship. So there's a lot of player management going on behind the scenes, and engagement with medical people and all of that none of us know anything about. So we have to caveat everything we talk about in the National League in that context, because if Clare were to play this championship without Tony Kelly, Shane has just mentioned 2, and I think there was a couple of more as well. That would lessen their options significantly. So there's a lot of game management going on behind the scenes to make sure things are right. And while it'd be great for Clare to beat Kilkenny in Kilkenny to beat Clare, as the case might be, everything is to be caveated, and everything is by the managers of the champion, because of the nature now of the way things run into it, and that's why for example. I'd say in terms of the league itself, if any of these teams are to get to the league final, I think their first hope is that at least it would be an opposition from a different province that you wouldn't see around for a while, not from the province that you're going to meet in the round robin series in your hurling. So I'd say these are the things that are exercising the minds of team managers at the moment, and we need to understand that.
And like, if you're a county manager, would you nearly be like, do you know what, I wouldn't mind getting a team holiday away, a team training session, a camp for a weekend, rather than playing a big match, where we can just basically go through what we want to do, rep our puck outs, whatever it might be. Like, as a county manager, you're sometimes thinking that's preferable.
Well, they have had a bit late now, to be fair. They've had over the last month or so, Kilkenny have had a kind of 2, we'll call them free weekends. And I know that Derek would have used that inside in UPMC in Nolan Park to bring the team in, bring in the full squad. He'll have 35, 6 players or more in there. The injured lads are kind of watching what's going on. The rest are in there playing a competitive match. There's a chance to talk about tactics, how he wants to shape the game, particularly in the context of players who haven't had much time on the panel or new to the panel, so that they see what's actually happening in terms of team development and team movement and tactical awareness and all that sort of stuff. So there's been a little bit of that lately, but I know a few teams have maybe Cork were down in West Kerry last weekend, and they decided to go away. Kilkenny go to Carton House during the course of the summer, prepare for the championship. All right, other counties like to pop on an airplane and off to sunny parts of Portugal or wherever it is. So there's Ryan Taylor's been mentioned there by that texter there, and that's a good point. Now he's been a very influential player as well, but to see note that Taylor could be missing a lot of the championship, yeah, he'd be a big loss to Clare now. I'd feel for them with that. There's no doubt about it. Because he's a guy that has got a bit of experience in the last couple of years, and his confidence has grown as well. So to pull a lad out like that and try and bring on a new player to suddenly take on the mantle of what he was doing, it's not easy, particularly in the cauldron that is the Munster Championship.
Yeah, particularly when he's such a great line breaker. You think of Tony Kelly when he's able to burst through and get his scores from, just cutting through the lines. And Ryan Taylor is somebody who can also do that. We saw some of his brilliant scores and brilliant work against Limerick in recent games. If you can do it against Limerick, you can do it against anyone. But
absolutely, but then that's the way the game has gone now. You need players who are able to break the line and move on and take the return pass on that. And Ryan Taylor well put there by that. A good link man is Ryan Taylor, and that's the best summary we could give to that young man.
And like you mentioned that training camp in Kerry, so Cork lost Mark Coleman. Well, we don't know exactly for how long. Maybe the news isn't too bad, but I mean, that's the risk. You go away to training camp, you could pick up a jaw injury or broken jaw just as quickly as you could in a match.
Absolutely. You could get that inside the new PMC in Nolan Park or wherever Kilkenny are training or Tipp are training and that. Look, this is all part and parcel of what goes on. I mean, the one thing you want to get out of these training sessions is that they're kind of robust and physical, and you can get some idea if you're a selector as to what players are kind of up to, what sort of mood they're in, and things like that. So if you're a fringe player and you get an opportunity at a location like that, you want to, you might not get too many opportunities to impress the manager. You try and take it. So yeah, there will be injuries and all that. I'm not sure if Mark Coleman's is too bad, but he's been troubled by injury a fair bit now. That he could do the break now, to be honest, at this stage, and get back in the hurling scene, if I put it that way, because he's had a tough time with injuries, and Cork need him back. It is the reality as well.
And you know, it's one of those things, you're preparing a team. You obviously like hurling is a game of intensity and getting stuck in and throwing the body about and getting used to doing that. But then you might be coming up to a big match and you're worried about injuries, and like you can't go the American football route and put like a bib on the quarterback and say nobody's allowed to tackle that guy. He's got the red bib on, you can't miss him, don't tackle him. You can't do that in hurling. You want to make sure lads don't go out fucking flaking each other in training matches, but you have to, you know, they have to go hard.
Yeah, but I think in fairness now, every inter-county manager, be it hurling or football, are now guided by the medical team that's behind them. There's a number of medical people there who are professional in this area. They will know now from, I mean, the measurements that are taking place in every player. They have those jokes behind their heads, marking, measuring every movement they make on the field in training and that. So they know what the workload on players are now. They know what their body is capable of, and they marry those readings against the injury profile that a player might have at a given time or historically as well. So I think managers are well informed, and it might often be a case of saying to a medical person, look, should I sit this guy out here today now? Would one extra weekend free from a competitive game just be the difference between him getting back on and staying involved? So I think the whole science of sport now, again, hurling or Gaelic football, it doesn't matter, is now very much being dictated, and I think managers are generally reluctant, and certainly reluctant during the course of the National League. It might be a bit different in the Championship if your whole Championship season is depending on a player staying on the field or whatever it might be if he's a star player. But during the course of the league, it might be an important competition to a fair extent. But at the same time, I think managers will not take chances with players because they want them all for the Championship, particularly from a hurling perspective. The intensity now of both Leinster and Munster, the round robin series, means you want everybody on board.
Yeah, and just back to the Offaly Cork game, which is on in Tullamore this weekend. And in the form lines, Offaly, they've drawn with Wexford. They led by Kilkenny by 6 points, and you were talking about that. They lost heavily to Waterford. But they're against a Cork team who, you know, obviously you have to factor in the travel and all that kind of stuff. It sometimes can take a little something out of your legs. But hugely inconsistent in their matches so far. Like that first 25 minutes against Kilkenny was, you know, really, really poor. Against Clare at times they fell behind, and I was like, you know, this is basically watching the same Cork as we've watched for the last 20 years. And then in their most recent outing against Waterford, when they head by 10, you were thinking Cork are back. And then, you know, they only win by 2, so they fell away madly. What do you think of this Cork team?
Well, given their success at under-20 and the star players that have come through that over the last while, and that Cork are surprising me that it is taking so long to get back into the winners' roster. They're not a million miles away, and they obviously will prefer when the ground gets that little bit harder during the Championship season. And they're still able to a very decent shout of I believe, of doing very well this year. There'd be one county I think can deliver, but has to be frustrating. I mean, that day down in Cork, you gave there a couple of weeks ago on that Saturday evening. I mean, when you can hear the murmurs from Cork supporters around you going in or going out of the stadium and all that, and they're concerned that there's not this bit of consistency about them and trying to really stamp their authority on games. They will have been very disappointed not to have beaten Kilkenny, and Pat Ryan, you know, was that way afterward. I mean, you know, people were talking to him about, was he worried about what division of the league he might be in next year, and he referred to the fact that, no, I'm not a bit worried about that. that's kind of irrelevant at this stage. As much as the officers of the board might want us in the top division, his concern was the here and now and how things were shaping up here and now, and trying to get back all these players and trying to get into a winning pattern. So I think, again, Cork are at the stage of, can we say what the Cork team will be in the first round of the Munster Championship? Probably not. Injuries aside, of course. I think he has a number of positions to tie down. Plenty of good hurlers, but getting them to gel as a team has been the issue. They're obviously trying to mix a physical side of the game with the more moving game, which would be traditionally Cork style. But they know that they need to. They've worked on a lot of work there in the gym with various people over the last year or more to build up the whole upper body strength of players. Because as much as hurling is about skill and tactics, it's also about the physical formation of players that are on the field. And probably Cork maybe were a little bit behind in that regard, but I think they're slowly getting into that. I think Cork will be a more serious threat come in a few weeks' time. I think they might be. I think they might show on Sunday against Offaly. They'll be sharper, and I think we'll have a better idea. I think Offaly will have it all to do, but I think after a very decent showing against Kilkenny now, there's a challenge for Offaly, because ultimately this year for Offaly, in many respects, they're going to end up in Division 1B now, pretty certain. Their biggest target has to be winning the Joe McDonagh Cup. That's the biggest target for them this year. They will be disappointed with that last year. And that's no gimme. I mean, they have Down, Westmeath, Kerry, Laois and Meath in that. And Meath, or the Laois will, and Westmeath will equally, they all will, of course, but Laois and Westmeath will equally feel that they're well capable of winning that. And by the way, Offaly have to travel down to Kerry, and they've had many very talented on there. Albeit a lot of new players on the Kerry team, and then there's some very good hurlers on that team, including one who will be a Kilkenny club hurler in a few weeks' time. So Offaly will want to focus on that as well, but finish the National League as best as possible, but be really focused on the Joe McDonagh Cup.
And Fionn Mackesy is the player you're referring to there. What's been the sort of reaction within Kilkenny to the Kilkenny senior or Kerry senior hurler moving over? And are people immediately thinking, oh, is this guy going to end up in a Kilkenny jersey?
Well, he won't be in a Kilkenny jersey this year. He'll obviously stick with Kerry this year. A Kilkenny jersey next year, every possibility. But I suppose that all depends on how he gets on playing for O'Loughlin Gaels this year. I mean, there was another Kilkenny City club were courting him as well, as they say, and he opted to go to O'Loughlin Gaels. So, yeah, we're looking forward to that. I mean, O'Loughlin Gaels have not had I think it could be the last big name to land in O'Loughlin Gaels was Aidan Fogarty. He's very much part and parcel of that club there as well. So it's a long number of years ago now. So they're, they did very well winning Kilkenny, and we're only a puck of a ball away from winning in All-Ireland. I don't know how much that. I don't know this young man at all from Kerry. But obviously, he'll be heading up this direction now. But for the moment, his duties lie with Kerry, and seeing can Kerry how they're going to get on in the National League. They're in 4th position in Division 2A at the moment, and obviously they have ambitions around the Joe McDonagh Cup. So that's his focus at the moment. I think O'Loughlin Gaels probably won't get to this young until probably June or July.
Crackety Ash is saying there's no manager taking Cork lightly. Drew a Tipp and lost to Clare and Limerick by a point. He's talking about Munster Championship last year. Nickey, when you kind of mention Clare or Cork and SNC work and building themselves up and this type of thing, do you ever think, well, maybe Cork just can't win in All-Ireland that way? Now, I don't think they're that far away either myself, but is playing a physical game, is that suited to them? Is there such a thing as a DNA for a county in terms of like, this is how we play, this is how we succeed? Like, can Kilkenny play, I don't know, a short, sharp, sort of not going into contact type game and win an All-Ireland? You hear about Tipperary, traditionally it was like a physical type game. And then, the criticism in the past 25 years will say of not having ball winners or whatever. So, does a county have a DNA?
I look at, I mean, Kilkenny, being parochial about it, we would always have been well our style and all things like that. But the game has evolved. I mean, you're not seeing as much catching the ball in the air anymore. You're not seeing doubling the ball in the air anymore. You're not seeing round hurling anymore. The game has evolved, and you need to have characters on the team who are able to evolve with it. You need very skillful hurlers now. Limerick have been extremely successful in the way that whole short game and hitting into open zones and players running onto the ball and creating space for themselves. They've made that very successful. But you still need strong physical players. It's interesting that this week we're hearing that Johnny Glynn has rejoined the Galway hurlers. Now, it's 5 years or so since he played hurling for Galway, but the logic here might be that he has a group of players at the moment. There's a lot of smallish, skillful players, pacey players, but you sometimes need a lad who's going to win that dirty ball. And maybe for 10 minutes in a game, Glynn just might be that guy at centre forward or at full forward who can take a partnership and may just create a bit of space for some of these nippier players and all that. So there's a place in the game for every one of those. And I think from the question marked with Cork, and there was a text on there a moment ago, I mean, it's spot on. They were not that far behind a lot of teams last year. And I'm certainly, that's spot on there, Crack of the Ash. I'm certainly saying that are to be watched this year. They just need to get a few things right at the moment, and they're not a million miles away from it. They got to win the last day against Waterford. I think that'll have given the momentum. I think they'll beat Offaly on Sunday, and that'll be 2 wins. And suddenly they're in a different position. They'll have one game left. I'm not sure who that is against. I think it's possibly against Wexford, actually. And who knows? They could end up with 3 wins in the league yet, and that'll be good enough to see them retain Division 1A status. But if you can manage to get a couple of wins at the end stages of the league, realizing then that the next game is the championship, you're in a better mood in training. You're coming off a little winning run, and that starts to instill confidence in players and mentors alike.
So Dublin are also facing Galway this weekend. That game is going to be on at that's in Pearse Stadium. I'm not sure if you've ever heard about this. I won't go into too much detail, but I know in the past that these two counties have had some fierce battles, very physical games. I'm sure you remember within the past 10 years or so. And I know that once the two sets of players, or certainly a certain group of players within the two sets, bumped into each other on the street, and there was squaring up on the street in the city of Galway. This was in the aftermath of one of the games. So these two counties do not love each other. You talked about that change in size profile of Galway, and it's not as many big players as when they were winning the All-Ireland and challenging for it. I would say the same about Dublin in the last year or two. And you've been in Parnell Park a few times to see them as well in recent years. It's not really landed a giants anymore between these two teams.
It's a fair point you're making, but I think Dublin are not in as good a position. I think Micheál Donoghue, in fairness, he's seen a number of players kind of disappear off the panel, and these were guys who kind of were solid players for Dublin over the last couple of years, and they've lost them, so they're very experienced attached to Dublin at the moment. And it just doesn't seem to be happening for the county. They don't appear to be posing the same threat. Now, if they could get back the likes of Donald Burke to full fitness, he's almost a 10-point man a game for them, and that he should be back okay now. He missed the Phoenix club run, and possibly had they been against the Locks and Gales, who knows what might have happened. So if they could get him back, but there's been a few decent underage players, but some or another Dublin have just slipped down the ladder, and they're going to be, in my view, they'll be under pressure now. They'll probably end up Division 1B next year. Now, it'll still be a competitive division, and it might possibly be a division where they can launch themselves again. But I think Dublin, in my estimation, have certainly not been moving on the way I thought. And I feel sorry for Micheál Donoghue, because they have a right good man in there, and particularly with Franny Ford being in there as a coach. I think they have right good people involved there. But if it's up to the players to step to the plate, I think they'll have a difficult time defeating Galway in Pearse Stadium next Sunday. And irrespective of any history behind all of what you've just said at the outset, I don't think that's going to matter very much. Galway will just simply want to stay winning, and Sheffield will want to keep moving along now. He's got Eamon O'Shea as his right-hand man. As I said, interesting in John Gillane to offer another dimension to the attack. And I think this is a game I think Galway will win. But it's up to Dublin now to really go over there and just start really hurling like they can. There's some very good hurlers on it, but they just seem to slip. And you know them better than anyone, Shane. You're up in that neck of the woods. You see these guys all the time, and but they just don't seem to be having the impact at the moment that you really need to have going forward with the championship just around the corner.
Yeah, and certainly getting everyone on the pitch at the one time has been a huge problem. Like, the depth isn't really there. Like, when they don't have Paddy Doyle, who, I'm sure you're aware is one of the brightest young players in the country, They don't have Owen O'Donnell playing at the moment. Chris Crummey's only just back. I mean, how sharp could he be in his first game thrown in against Limerick? Then you've got Donald Burke, who's clearly not 100% right. Ronan Hayes is only working his way back. So, Joe, what can we really expect other than maybe a humbling defeat to Limerick the last day out? Because Limerick do it to any team when they're not 100% right.
Ah, yeah. Well, look, when you're talking about Limerick, you're talking about the best. I mean, they still are the team to be beaten this year. There's no point in saying otherwise. They have, and I think what John Kyle has managed to do, he's managed to get some really good game time to a few fringe players, and I think they're certainly creating some maybe difficult decisions that the selectors will have to face in Limerick, because it's at the stage now where maybe the introduction of a couple, 2 or 3 new players maybe is what Limerick needs now to kind of push them on to this 5 in a row. They mightn't talk about this 5 in a row. They're in a much stronger position, I believe, to win this 5 in a row than even Kilkenny were in the day, because they all had Tipperary breathing down their necks, and that game could go anywhere. But Limerick are a notch ahead of everybody. But no team is unbeaten. You don't know, they could get a couple of injuries, and some of the other teams could just rise their game against Limerick, which is often the case. But at the moment, as we chat about it in the early part of March, Limerick do appear to have all the ammunition to get through this year, and they've brought a couple of nice, good young players on that appear to be gelling well with obviously the players who have been there for the last number of years. So they are still the team to beat, at least as of March. We'll know a lot more during the Munster Championship to see how things are gelling out and who's going to be the big players there. And of course, we haven't mentioned a certain county that you know a bit about as well, called Tipperary. They're quietly working away with Liam Cahill and doing pretty well and having some good results also. So Tipperary are going to be very competitive as well, and they could very well be a team that will offer a fair resistance to what Limerick will throw at them in due course.
Yeah, and we'll come to that match just shortly. But just before we move on, Colm Lyons blind spot. He says, "Last throw the dice for Shefflin this year? ? Going to throw the kitchen sink at it." I mean, it probably does feel like at this stage, year 3, Galway are going to need something, aren't they? They're going to need something delivered.
Well, the minimum delivery this year is a Leinster final. I mean, now they were desperately unlucky last year. I mean, Killian Buckley out of nowhere put a ball in the back of the net that it's what Kilkenny often do. But Henry this year, the minimum is the Leinster final, but he's probably even thinking beyond that. It mightn't be enough. This is his third year, and Galway will be looking for some reward for that. And he's got out of his way now with Eamon O'Shea's right hand side, and obviously like this Johnny Glynn thing, which is, I'm not saying it's going to be a championship or going to create any certainties regarding the championship, but it does offer. It clearly, in my view, it shows the thinking they're having in Galway that we need to have some big, strong force around the forward line to create a bit of space for the younger players and the speedier players and all of that sort of stuff. But this is Henry's big year in Galway, no question about it.
Okay, and then just before we come to Limerick against Tipperary, Westmeath, Antrim, I'm just going to sort of give a bit of an overview. Antrim have had some up and down performances, and of course they were very close to beating Dublin, but they're on 0 points, minus 53 scoring difference, so not going brilliantly in that sense, even though they were very close against Dublin. Westmeath, now they've played the 3 strongest teams. They've played Limerick, Tipperary, Galway. They've lost all the games, but they've come, other than the filleting against Galway, they actually pushed somewhat changed teams against Tipperary and Limerick quite strongly. And Joe Fortune was saying afterwards, I'm happy with the performances. And again, there's a dressing room that's probably disappointed. You play Limerick and you play Tipp and you bring it down to the wire. There were 2 minutes left and there were 4 points in it. This is the Tipp game. We conceded a really dubious goal at the end, which kind of soured my taste a bit, but I'm very proud of the endeavour. And to be fair, he's welcomed back Killian Doyle, Davy Glenn and Angus Clark lately as well. So it feels like things are on the up somewhat with Westmeath as they prepare to welcome Antrim to Mullingar this weekend.
Well, yeah, these are the 2 teams really. Look, they're propping up that group, and it's not going to make a difference to what the group they're in next year. They will be in 1B, but at the same time, it's going to be important in the context of, from Westmeath point of view, I mentioned the Joe McDonagh Cup. They're in that this year. Antrim are in the Leinster Championship. They're coming down to Kilkenny for their first game. So I think from a Westmeath point of view, I think they at the moment have the slightly better momentum, I believe, than Antrim. Now, maybe Antrim will get more of their players back. There's a few lads that, let's say, Darren Gleeson is hoping to get his hands on for the championship. But at the moment, Westmeath looked to be in the better position, gave some very decent account of themselves in the National League to date. Yeah, they got a whopping beating off of Galway. But overall, they have recovered a bit from that. And in fairness to Joe Fortune, I like Joe. He wears his heart in his sleeve. He really goes for it, and he's instilled great character into those players. And I think for Westmeath, the importance of Sunday's game will be to get a win under their belt and start going into that Joe McDonagh Cup with a bit of positivity. And equally, from an Antrim point of view, they feel this is probably their best bet. They're already beaten by Dublin, so they'll feel this is their best bet to get some win under their belt before they start off on their championship trails. Because other than that, it can be very difficult to lift the players if you haven't had something from the league going into the championship.
So we'll talk now about Limerick against Tipperary, and that game has been moved to Páirc Uí Chaoimh. The pitch is out of commission at the Gaelic grounds, which, pitches are being destroyed up and down the country with the weather recently. That blanket of snow that came last Friday and then destroyed programs of matches around the country. But I think Tipperary would love to have had a dry run at playing at the Gaelic grounds ahead of the Munster Championship. But look, so be it. That's the way things are at the moment. They'll go down and do it at Páirc Uí Chaoimh instead. I would imagine Tipperary, now while they may not put out the absolute strongest 15 they have, they will go full guns for this game, because I suppose they want to see how does this match up against Limerick. And even if Limerick don't play the exact 15 that they're going to play in the summer, they are going to play the exact same way. So it's a chance for Liam Cahill to road test his players against how Limerick play.
No, absolutely. I think, it will be interesting. In many ways, maybe it'll help them in a way going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh and maybe not have it in the Gaelic grounds. But look, time will tell. But I do think this is an important game for Liam Cahill. It's an opportunity for his players to know how will they actually get on against what Limerick are going to throw at him. We've Garrod O'Connor landing points and landing scores over from all angles, done brilliantly with his college, Limerick College there this year. Now, how will he manage in the heat of battle against a Limerick side and the style of play that they play? And there's many other players on the Tipperary team in a similar position. Look, we pretty well know the Limerick team, barred a couple of younger lads that have actually come on in the last while that John Kiley has been given game time to. But for Liam Cahill, he will have been disappointed with last year, and he'll want players now to stand up and start cementing their position on the team and make it easy for the selectors to pick that championship team when they line out in the first round of the Munster Championship. So no, this won't be shadow boxing in that sense. But at the end of the day, though, Shane, we've always got to remember it's a National League. And before Liam Cahill or John Kiley lines out their team on Sunday, whatever name is listed on the team on Friday night, before they take Sunday, wanting to know if is this guy okay from his injury? Is there any danger that by playing him he's going to aggravate an injury? These sort of discussions take place in the dressing rooms before games, or even on the Saturday over the phone, as mentors and managers and medical people consult with one another about what their findings on an individual player are. So, it will be a very competitive game, but let's not think it's going to be a championship pace.
So then the situation around Kyle Hayes, of course, continues to drag on. Now, what I'm hearing is that he's not available for this weekend because he'll be injured. And look, this is kind of on record in news reports, a curfew of 10:30 p.m. or whatever. So getting back from a game that will finish around 9 and it's an hour and a half drive without traffic and all this kind of, in a way, it's probably for the best not to have him involved for this weekend. But what did you make of him playing against Dublin when all of this is still going on? And for my money, I just thought it was a case of let's deal with the heat now, get it over and done with. So if he's playing again in the summer, it'll be less of a big deal.
Look, obviously there's a court case pending and the outcome, but we don't know yet, so we have to be careful what we would say here. But other than that, it's awkward for him, it's awkward for John Kiley, it's awkward for Limerick. And when you're not in full control of all the facts, I'm loath to pass any comment on it per se. Other than to say, look, it's a difficult situation for a lot of people, including the young man who obviously was the recipient of some tough treatment. I mean, that was viewed on. We all physically saw that on newspapers. But let the court make its action, and then it's whatever it decides. That may or may not determine how Limerick will pursue this matter going forward in terms of Kyle Hayes' availability. The one thing the championship would be better off if Kyle Hayes could play, and we love to see him. He's a great hurler, but at the same time, the bottom line is the law of the land has to take its course, and we have to sit back down and see what that's going to be.
And just in terms of, like, if we're to stick to the hurling side of it, if he's not available at wing back this weekend, we don't yet know if Declan Hannon, if he's going to be involved this weekend or when he'll be involved. And of course, being a player who's plenty of miles on the clock, despite still being absolutely brilliant, crucial. You just don't know with injuries when you get past a certain point. Who, like, is Cathal O'Neill ready for centre back? Is he actually ready for a wing back come championship?
Limerick are very adaptable. We saw where Will O'Donoghue went back centre back last year for a period. I think somebody else, Reedy, I think, went back centre back for a match there, I think, in this year's league. Cathal O'Neill can play centre back. These players are very flexible. They're good hurlers, and the sort of game that they've been asked to play. With Kyle Hayes playing wing back when he's as equally effective in the forwards. So there's a lot of those Limerick players in the middle third of the field are very flexible in where they might be able to play. So I don't think that's going to cause too. They will adjust very quickly. How quickly Will O'Donoghue was able to adjust to centre back last year when Declan Hannon wasn't available. So they have a system down there where, behind closed doors in training, they see what some of the things that happen in a game. There was losing a player, so they're working on that in training. So it's not that they're going to arrive in Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Sunday against Tipperary and got to wonder who we're going to play here. They have all that down. These selectors have talked for hours and hours about the possibilities and the options and whatnot, and they've tried some of these things in training. So I think from a Limerick perspective, I think they'll be very comfortable. Whoever goes into centre back, the mentors will be very comfortable that person is more than capable of manning and controlling that position.
Did you ever agonise over something like this, a positional switch, or putting someone in a position where they're not totally familiar in a big game, and then afterwards had to deal with, well, whether it worked or didn't work? Is that that stands out?
Not particularly. I think that's probably not as obvious now as as in the past. It was a rarity. Maybe the exceptions were. I mean, we've got to remember Brian Cody was a full back and a full forward. The great Kilkenny hurler Pa Dillon was played full back and played full forward. Jim Lynch played full back and full forward. There's just a couple of memories from my own kind of time here now. But you don't, now players are very adaptable around the field. I mean, for God's sake, you're seeing more maybe so in Gaelic football. If you take actually the club championship this year, look at how many points the Loughlin Gaels half backline got from play throughout the Kilkenny championship and in the club championship this year. So really, at the way players are being coached now, while your job as a defender obviously is principally to defend, you're given latitude and freedom to become involved in the play up the field further, which means that you move into space, get the ball from somebody maybe on the far side of the field, and they know you're going to be there, and they know even though you might be a back, and often we'd say to the backs, Jesus, don't shoot, give it to the forwards. I think now that many of the backs are well up there with forwards in terms of accuracy and all of that. So that's why the game has evolved so much that you can be a defender, but you can also be a huge contributor in terms of scores, even if you are that defender, because of the way the game has been played now.
Has a team ever been as far under the radar, despite going for a 5 in a row, as this Limerick team? It's incredible how quiet it's been so far, and maybe that's partly because they haven't played a big hitter up to now.
I don't think it's. I think, look, it's just the way things are at the moment. I mean, the National League has had some gain in it, but it hasn't set the world on fire. We're in a climate of where we're competing against lots of other sports at the moment as well. You have the Six Nations on, you have the Premiership coming up to the relatively closing stages of it. You have lots of other things happening as well in other sports, and the hype just probably hasn't hit in as much maybe as we just like to think. Limerick are, I don't believe Limerick are that under the radar with people. People exactly what they're getting Limerick. There just hasn't been a lot of hype about it, and maybe that's to John Kiley's credit that he's managed to push away any kind of publicity or mileage about it. But the bottom line is that once they start hitting balls in the Munster Championship this year, the whole thing about 5 in a row will very much on the radar. Limerick might not want to talk about it, and I can absolutely understand it. And they will probably get a lesson from Kilkenny in that regard, in that when the 5 in a row talk started here, everything went ballistic. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that that's what caused Kilkenny not to win 5 in a row. The bottom line was they met a better team. And Limerick will be smart enough to know that there are teams out there capable of beating and helping them win in 5 in a row. And Kilkenny are one of them. So you have to make sure everything is right and take nothing for granted. And John Kiley and his officials are smart people. They will take nothing for granted and leave no stone unturned to make sure that everybody's focused in the right direction. So that's what makes the upcoming championship. We're talking about the league, but the upcoming championship very intriguing because there's no certainties in sport. That's absolutely. Even though we're saying Limerick look like odds on to win the Lee McCarthy Cup, but I mean, would any of us be prepared to put our house? Not sure we would still.
So I'm looking at like this weekend, like if Tipperary want to catch up on Limerick, I don't think there's a problem going down and like putting your best foot forward and losing, because I think it's better to find out exactly what you have and exactly what you have to improve. We're joined now, delighted to say we're joined by Niall Moran. I wasn't sure if Niall would be on or not, but delighted to have you on, Niall. How are things?
Cheers, Shane. Day job got in the way there for a few minutes there, Shane. I actually forgot all about you there. We're getting carried away with ourselves here. Working in farm.
I didn't go with the big bill, Niall. I wasn't sure if you'd be in or not.
No, we're
How are you,
okay
Niall? Commiserations for last weekend. Kieran's got the better of you.
Oh, they're much better on the day, Nicky. I'd say you'll argue in Kilkenny natural order restored after the weekend. I'd say. Again,
yeah, but I thought with the fair sprinkling of Clare minors on the team, I expected a little bit more fire out of your lads. Even though Kieran's, were really for winners in the end.
Yeah, Kieran's a very, very strong, I suppose. Look, again, for our Scarish, we had a very good side and they were very well looked after by the lads who were over them as well. And look, we'd have been hoping that they might have got a hearty out of them. But again, they're very, very hard won. And Nina, again, had a huge win in that. The third time in a row that the hearty was won by a different team. And I suppose, look, that probably knocked a little bit of the confidence off Art Skull. But again, Shane, I don't know you were there, Nicky obviously was, but it was frightening to see the ability of some of these Kilkenny lads. There's loads of hurlers, and I suppose one of the things I'd take away from Nicky was athletically they looked to be on a different planet. But you probably mentioned there with regard to that particular competition that you were kind of judging minors as 17s playing under 19, but like the reality of it is, in old money, a good minor would have been playing senior with his club. And I suppose now we're looking at minors with the same lenses, and the reality is they're only kids. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose we'd always be very wary from our experience here of trying to build up a now under 17 to be something that they're not. And look, again, it's a conversation for another day, but in terms of the age groups, I still think that we'd be better served having an under 18 championship as a minor championship. And I know even within our own county in Limerick, they've kind of returned to that. But Shane, one thing is natural order restored. Kilkenny, and they looked a really tactically astute team. Brian Downing did a great job done with them. Huge, couple of guys up front there. Young Hunt, really, really good hurler. Jeff Neary from Greg Ballycallan, really classy operator at centre back, and I could go on about them. So no, I said it makes interesting reading for what's coming, because I think there's a perception out there, Nicky, and I don't know, just sometimes Kilkenny fuel it to say that Kilkenny hurling is not what it used to be and they're not producing the same level of hurlers, but I'll tell you, my experience is very, very different from it. And it's a stark reminder to the likes of the Limericks and Clares, who all think they're chasing on irons. Kilkenny they still become the team to beat more often than not.
Yeah, no, I'd accept Kilkenny have very good hurlers. Incidentally, actually, that team, Kieran's team that played Arsenal Reach last week, one unusual statistic from it, and it's very unusual, I've never come across it in my time. I think about 7 or 8 of the players actually played senior club championship hurling in Kilkenny last year. Now that's partly what Niall has talked about there with the under 19 grade, and I totally accept that there was quite a number of the Arsenal Reach lads were actually under 18, whereas the Kieran's lads were up to 19. And a year at that level can be a factor. But to think you had 7 or 8 of the Kieran's lads actually played senior club hurling is incredible statistic for a second level schools team.
And I think, and I stand corrected, but just talking to our own lads there, I think they said that 14 is starting 15 were under 19. And I suppose, look, you probably have to realise there, I know Kieran's, like, they have a huge catchment of first years. Like, they could have up to 180, 190 first years. And do you know what I mean? I know in our own school here we have 120, and I suppose the idea would be that you try and get as many of them to hurl for as long as possible. So I would imagine that even as a management in Kieran's, they're trying to base their teams off 5th and 6th years, because do you know what I mean? Obviously they want to lads. But again, look, his conversation is that a part of me there is I even just see the preparation of some of these teams. Like, it's with the intercounty minor and 20s championship starting probably within the next 4 or 5 weeks. Those managements are now under huge pressure to get teams ready. And I think what you're finding for any of the lads involved schools levels, Nicky and Shane, you might even see it there, that they're coming under pressure when it gets to the closing stages of the schools championships. No different if it's Gibbon Cup. It's be seen as a hindrance as opposed to a help. And I don't think that's maybe the right attitude to have towards schools hurling. And to be fair to the intercounty managements, they have no other choice because the pressure is on them to get a team ready for a couple of weeks. So I really think that, from my experience, and I use mine solely, I do think that I think we've better served the minors under 18 in terms of catching players. I think you're in danger of losing them, and I also would question that, could we not start our minor championship later in the year? And I'm talking about bringing it into maybe even starting July, just as the intercounty senior championship is coming to a close. That we kind of, you know what I mean, that we have these young lads playing at the height of hurling, which is July, August. You're wrapping it up again by September, the start of September, before they go back to schools. And I think for a lot of people that intercounty GA is a huge social outlet for so many people. We saw that during COVID. And I think that even what you might find is when the intercounty season is over for a lot of spectators who may not have clubs, they then lose that attachment to going to matches because they don't have a club. Like, you take inner city Limerick, like, there's not a whole pile of clubs in inner city Limerick, and a lot of guys there go to a lot of the games. And I think that they'd still turn out to go to see a minor intercounty game before they go see a club senior game. And I think it might take a little bit of the pressure off at this side of the year, because there is huge pressure on these young lads. And bear in mind here as well, number one and first and foremost, they're doing their leaving cert here in 2 months' time. And that's, like, do you know what I mean? So you're hitting them every which way. And for an initiative of going to under 17 and going to earlier that was meant to alleviate player burnout, I think it's the quite opposite of what's come out of it, like, you know.
And not to mention, a lot of lads are playing freshers in college as well once they've gone past the leaving cert. You were talking about the strength of Kilkenny, and obviously we know the strength of Limerick in recent years. Also, you're seeing right there at the coalface with OurGame as well, that Clare are coming all the time, because, you know, plenty of their players are landing in front of you as well. So Clare are going nowhere.
Anecdotally, Shane, again, I said, look, I'm back with the younger guys now. That's how we do it here in cycles. But definitely over the last 4 years, and just Jerry McDermott, some of these guys, Donald Maloney, they've gone back into Clare straight away. The Clare Academy is really, really modern and strong, and you can see that. I often actually use an analogy here. If you're talking about a kind of an anecdote, I remember going back maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was 3 young lads. They're in 6th year. Just the time of COVID. There was 3 young lads walking down the corridor in front of me. On the left, you had Cathal O'Neill. On the right, you had Colin Coughlin. In the middle, you had Colm O'Mara, an exceptional hurler from Clonlara. And I remember saying to someone there, in watching the 3 of them at that point in time, was the difference between Limerick's underage and Clare's. The 2 boys from Limerick were, at that point in time, were bursting out of their pants. Do you know what I mean? It was ready to explode off them. And Colm O'Mara, who'd be equally as good a hurler as what they were, had the same natural build. The pants was hanging off him. And I see it there now. It's only now that Colm O'Mara is coming into that senior setup on the back of a brilliant Clonlara campaign and a brilliant campaign with UL with Fitzgibbon. But there, to me, was those other guys were a product of 3 or 4 years of really exceptional S&C, whereas Clare, up to that point, it mightn't have been as coordinated. But now I see the young lads coming. They're every bit as big and strong, and probably what we get to see close hand is that they're really competitive with each other. You'd see them even taking a PE class if you had doing testing. They're keen to beat the other one, and they're capable of beating the other one. So, but look, I think a lot of teams are getting up to that scratch. I definitely think Clare have really come on a par, and do you know what I mean, and passing, and it's just taking a little bit of time. I know in Kilkenny, Nickey, is Michael Fennelly has gone back in. He's kind of gone back into coordinator at some shape or form there, I think, is he?
Yeah, the whole squad thing has been relaunched in Kilkenny now. It's called the Cathoig. So, yeah, Mick Fennelly has brought a huge new thinking and dimension to that. It's not for this program here now, but I mean, I was at the launch there lately, and certainly there's a lot happening in that space. And Kilkenny, in terms of the whole development squad area, is now in a significantly stronger place than it ever was.
Well, Nickey, I know you have to go because you have a meeting to go to. You've been brilliant with your time, so thanks so much for joining us again.
Shane, thanks for that, and we'll talk again soon. And Niall, take care. We'll see you soon too.
Yes.
So, Niall, if we're to talk about the game this weekend, how big of a game do you think it is for, I'm going to say for Tipperary, because obviously Limerick are the team that everyone's chasing. When it comes to summer, everyone expects that everything will come right for you. But maybe for confidence, is this a bigger game for Tipperary?
A huge game. I'm not quite sure what you've spoken about prior to arriving here, Shane, but I suppose ordinarily you would say there as on a Saturday evening at 7:35, you think the thought of going down to Cork to watch Limerick and Tipperary play, you'd say, you know what, I'll put the legs up and I'll watch it on the box. But I know for me personally, it's curiosity of actually seeing Tipperary. Last year's league semi-final, I think Tipp had really targeted that game, and up to that point in time of the year, they were the first team that really rattled Limerick. But probably what happened in that league semi-final was up to about 60 minutes, it was neck and neck, but Limerick pulled away there at the end of it without having the direct scores in front of me now. But my abiding memory was like Tipp were just physically wise, they were a little bit behind. I suppose personnel wise, they had older guys. I know Bonner had a great game that day early on for about 45-50 minutes, but then he just naturally at his stage of his career, he just ran out of that level of steam. And I think then what we saw in the championship was Tipp brought it another 7 or 8 minutes longer, and it's like, you know what I mean, it was an incredible finish. I suppose that game was lost in the midst of another wonderful Munster Championship. That finale to Limerick Tipperary was just an incredible game to be at. Even the atmosphere that day in the old stand in Turles. So I think my thing here now is I think Cahill has a bit, even more of a stamp on his team. I think he has guys who are physically capable of going a bit longer. And again, I know the word out of Tipperary is that they haven't been as fit as this and strong as this in a long, long time. And I do think that similar to what Liam Sheely did going up to Nolan Park in the late noughties, I think that Tipperary are really going to target this game. They're going to put down a marker because, you know, it's not good enough for them to come away and say we're on the way to getting something. I think they actually need a firm barometer of their form, and that can only come with a win. And so I really think they're going to come at it. And I suppose in the Limerick camp, look, they were really impressive. I was at the Dublin game. Look, they looked really impressive, but the speed, like Dublin really offered up a very poor challenge that evening. Like it was a challenge game. Like they weren't laying tackles on. Limerick had the run of the park, and I think we're probably going to find now for this weekend with Limerick is there's more guys probably going to be reintegrated into it. I don't know where Declan Hannon is at, but it'd be interesting to see, does he make a seasonal debut at 6, because you know what I mean, at the end of the day, okay, Limerick will probably be in the knockout stages of the league. They've guaranteed just this is the second last game of the league stage, and obviously another semi-final to come. So I think it's going to be a cracking game, but I really think Tipp are going to come with what we saw in Nolan Park in the late noughties. I do think they're going to come, because I think he needs to road test them again, and there's no better road test.
And given the way you look at the game and study the game, do you think Tipperary are trying to play a Limerick-esque type of game, or do you find these teams to be quite different?
I'd love to say, Shane, that I'm a connoisseur of hurling and tactical know-how, but as of now, I've never been involved in inter-county senior team, so I most definitely am an expert. I consider myself an avid follower, all right? And I suppose every day you try to surmise what teams are going to come with and what they're not going to come with. And, okay, like, I suppose the art of flattery to imitate is to flatter and all the rest. And, like, I would say this, that if people are trying to beat Limerick exactly doing what Limerick do, then forget about it, because Limerick are going to be obviously better at it. They're further up the road than everyone else, and it's not that they've stagnated in terms of what they're doing. They're obviously developing. So my thing that I probably are trying to take from the games so far, and I use Clare as a good barometer of this, I think teams are going to just push up. I actually think in an era where we're so tactically nuanced and obsessed with tactical setups, I actually think that this thing is going to be a case of we're actually going to go really man on man. Okay, we might find a situation where we're 1-on-1 inside in our full back line, we're wide open, but watching Limerick and Dublin the last day, just you have to stop Limerick getting their puck outs away easily. So straight away the first line of defence in the in your full forward line, you have to start to push there. Okay, now the obvious thing that you're going to see there after that, okay, if you're squeezing up the pitch, because Limerick may bring 2 midfielders back, you might find that Limerick have 8 inside their own 45, quite conceivable, Shane, right? So what you then have a situation is, well, there's 6-on-6 with maybe 90 yards of space, so it becomes a back's nightmare. But I think the argument here is, well, we're going to take our chances, all right? And yeah, it'll look horrendous at times. Like even some of what happened with Clare and Limerick in the Munster final, it looked like amateurish stuff, and we saw, to be fair to Cian Nolan in the Munster final, do you know what I mean, he was left high and dry. But I do think the logic of personnel maybe that Clare had that day didn't work, but the logic of what they did was, well, I'd rather by 9 goals as to get beaten slowly as in by 1,000 cuts in terms of getting cut with points. So I do think that this year you're going to see it being a lot more wide open at the inside and around the D area. I do think teams might take the chance to, if we cough up a couple of goals, I'd sooner cough 2 goals than 8 points from distance. And that raises, I think, the Limerick goal scoring rate. I think you see him scoring more goals, even in the Dublin game, created a lot more goal scoring chances. But coming back to your initial question, I know I've gone a roundabout way of answering it. Tipperary, Liam Cahill's mantra with all his underage teams has been goal hungry. That is the natural Tip game of turn, take your man on. And I do think with the personnel that he has, even the fresher personnel up front, I do think that they're far more, they have that potency within them. Now, the only problem is when you play that game against Limerick, Limerick covered that D so well. And that's probably where Tip have been shut down in previous games. But I think teams might take a different approach. I think like we're now into the, what you'd argue, the 7th year of this Limerick cycle. And I know obviously they're going for 5 in a row, but you know what I mean? With the exception of Kilkenny beating them, it could be a little bit more. I do think teams need to be a little bit more braver and say, look, let us go out and get hammered by goals, but not get beaten the same way that we've been getting beaten. I do think that's what you might see. It'd be interesting to see that on Saturday.
And I suppose that's maybe why Michael Breen is back there full back. We saw him up against Conor Whelan, and insofar as anyone can do well against Conor Whelan, he did pretty well against him the last day. Didn't totally snuff him out, of course. But that's probably with a view to Aaron Gillan. So Gillan versus Breen this summer is something I'd be surprised if we didn't see.
Yeah, I don't know, can anyone do well with Conor Whelan now? I think if we look back at the game to get grounds last year, I don't think that would have been the synopsis. But no, I do get what you're saying. Like, look, they're looking for potential matchups as they go along. And again, look, if you're trying to see it, like Clare probably came close to beating Limerick last year. They pushed up, and even despite, you know what I mean, I suppose the goals that conceded in the Munster final, they're within a whisker of winning it. Like, are Kilkenny capable of playing that game? They are capable of playing it. I suppose Tipperary, we need to learn a little bit more about them, but I imagine with the improvements that they're making, they will be capable of playing it. So I suppose, look, you have to look. Tipperary, they're all chasing Limerick, but remember at the moment, but there's enough teams on their own level that will chase them as well. Like, you know, and again, to come back to it, just 1 second. Okay, just come back to Munster. Munster is a bear pit. Munster is a bear pit there. So look, if Tipperary's sole focus is on Limerick, then they'll be in trouble. But obviously, you don't want to judge themselves off it to see exactly where they're at, but it can't be their sole focus.
Would you see, I've made this point before, and I know not everyone would agree, but I think Tipperary, not saying pick your best 15, but go out totally to try and win this game. Go as hard as you can, because more will be learned in defeat than in, let's say you had a victory and you'd put out your full team. And look, I'm just saying that sometimes it can totally point out exactly where you're going wrong, and then you could maybe do better the next day. So I don't know, are you more thinking shadow boxing is the way to go?
No, in Tip's case, go for it. See what? It was like you're still 4, 5, 6 weeks away, and it's not as if you're giving away your hand. Sure, with all the analysis and everything that's been done, teams know you inside out anyway. Do you know what I mean? And I just think with the more analysis and the more we move on tactics and stuff, I think the more it'll come back to just the sheer level of ability. And again, we had a conversation with Nickey about a game at a much lower, younger level, but it still came down to ability. You could have had all the setups that you wanted. The better team won because they had better players. And in all the talk about Limerick and tactics and stuff, people have to remember and keep on remembering that this is a generational group of players. And whilst Paul Kinnerk is rightly lavished with praise for everything that he's done, okay, and he's an incredible coach, generational coach, there is also the feeling that, you know what I mean, with the right management and stuff, that this group would have had ability to win an All-Ireland and All-Ireland. I'm not saying to win 5 of them, but an All-Ireland based on their own ability. Do you know what I mean? With a little bit of, because they are naturally very, very talented players. Like,
and the likes of Donnacha O'Donnell now has come in. He made a very good impression against Dublin. Again, you talked about the Tip players taking their man on. This guy seems to have only one thing in mind when the ball comes in towards him. Is he one of the, in terms of the young players, is he the one that looks kind of likely to maybe make an impression this summer?
Yeah, I suppose, look, to most observers in Limerick, he'd have been on the 20s a couple of years ago. I suppose last year was the first time he really came into focus as being a senior starter. And I remember just being at last year's local intermediate final, and I know John at that point was probably focused him. And I suppose as an observer, I would have seen Jesus did a very good free taker with Moline. He could have as easily been a target. But I suppose the key to what I've seen in Donnacha so far is that he's very, very incisive. He turns and goes. Now, again, doing that against the two teams he's done it against, and also with a view to Dublin the last day, like there was very little pressure on. So again, he'll need to be road tested as going forward. So I wouldn't be you know what I mean? I wouldn't be trying to blow a guy up out of the water. I suppose there's other forwards there that, you know what I mean, that are also excellent. Adam English is a guy who looks like pushing. Shane O'Brien is a guy based on both of their skipping performances look like pushing. Colin Nielsen has to push a little bit more. So I suppose I wouldn't be blowing him up. He's quite incisive, but again, we've probably seen with John as the year pushes on, he does tend to go with his tried and tested. And like Donica, he's done very well so far, and fair play to him, long may it continue. But there's probably bigger tests defensively that he would come up against. And it's probably not until you see those tests that you would make a true assertion of where he's at.
Yeah. Do you see any tweaks in terms of like positions this year? Cathal O'Neill being tried out at number 6 the last day, while John Kiley kind of mentioned a few times Dublin able to run up the centre because they had those 3 goal chances in the first half. It was very, very impressive going the other way. I mean, we've seen it. Will O'Donoghue going 6, Keane Lynch going from centre forward to midfield at different times. Like, there is that flexibility. Do you see any tweaks this year?
The first thing is, anyway, anyone can play in the back, Shane. All right,
True enough.
back, Shane. When you're part of the forwards club there, sure, if all else fails, go on the backs. Is there tweaks? Look, again, I suppose teams have to, they have to transition. Even successful teams have to find a little bit more as it goes. And obviously the age profile, for a team of 7 years on the road, the age profile is obviously going to push on with that. So I know that John is looking for things. David Reedy was also very, very good, and he was due to start that game against Dublin. He picked up an injury earlier on that week. So look, again, these are all tweaks, and maybe what you're asking is, could we see a transformation like we saw with Barry Nash or Kyle Hayes or whatever else? But look, he'll have to find changes, because the nature of it is injuries have come against Limerick already, and as I said, they haven't stood still when they had injuries, so you have to keep on finding replacements for when it does come, so that you're not stagnating. But again, it probably comes back to the ability of the hurler, Shane, and look, Carl is an exceptional hurler. In old money, he would have been catapulted straight into an inter-county team in Limerick with the weight of the world on top of him. And with this particular team, he's serving a long apprenticeship, but I suppose, look, he's one of many who's movable. But sometimes I wouldn't get carried away with a lot of this talk as well, though, Shane. Like, at the end of the day, you've only 15 guys who are playing. Do you know what I mean? And like, you can have the biggest panel in the world, but it still comes back to the guys around the pitch at any one given time. So I think I wouldn't be trying to feed this frenzy that Limerick can play it anyway or do it anyway. Like, Clare have found an awful lot of players in this National League. Tipperary found an awful lot of players in this National League. I see Galway, the rumour mill has that Johnny Glynn is back training. He would be a huge addition to them at this stage. Do you know what I mean? Cork are finding a couple of guys. You know, they still probably have to find their true identity, but they have a lot of very good players coming into it. So look, I'm very wary of this crack. Like, Munster is such a bear pit here as it goes. When that comes around, it's going to be a bear pit. But for now, the National League, I think for Limerick, they'll hope that they'll probably go with some of these younger guys for the next couple of weekends and can they put their own stamp on the team. And I suppose maybe last year, I suppose the danger was, as they reflect, could the league potentially have cost them their Munster championship? It could potentially have hindered them maybe in terms of going out a little bit harder. So I suppose they will have, even though they won last year, they'll obviously bear those lessons in mind, not to play with fire.
And who do you think is actually closest to Limerick? Who, in a one-off knockout game, let's say it gets an All-Ireland semi-final, final, we'll assume they'll get that far. Who do you think has the best chance of knocking Limerick off their perch?
I'm not trying to give you the political answer, but they all, like, look at last year's Munster Championship, Shane, as in, like, I suppose for a lot of your listeners and a lot of people who view television, I'd say they're sick of their heads listening to about Limerick, like, and so I mean, you see it there over the last 4 or 5 years. Like, there's been nothing between any of the team. Like, it's just consistently, Clare have come consistently at them. All right, and obviously last year they beat them. So you have to argue that Clare are consistently there, and they've added to their panel, and they've, like, Shane Allen and Tony Kelly, all these boys to come back in the National League. You would argue them. You still have to argue Kilkenny. Excuse me there for a second. Sorry for 1 second. You'd still have to argue. I'm on the shop floor here. I'm on the shop floor. Young lads coming.
Risky.
Not down to teach. So I'll, for any of your viewers who want to give out about teachers in the Department of Education, you hold up your letters to North Foley there. Another one. All right. But what was I going to say? Look, so, like, I still can go back to Nickey's conversation. Like, Kilkenny, like, it was very un-Kilkenny, like what happened last year's All-Ireland final, and I wouldn't put that down as a norm exactly of where they're at. I put that down, that was kind of freakish. So, like, you still say Kilkenny, if you come out of Munster, they look like the biggest rivals, and obviously within Munster you'd say Clare, but, like, again,
Well, I have to argue with that. Kilkenny have been hammered in 3 of their last 4 All-Irelands.
So yeah, but again, like you look at last year's, I'd still be up to 45, 50 minutes in last year's final. Like they had chances. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, John, what was the big wing forward? His name won't come to me there. He made his breakthrough season last year. Name just won't come to me. Tom Phelan could have had a man in a match to rival Walter Walsh last year's All Ireland, and it didn't break that way. Maybe a little bit of experience, a little bit of, do you know what I mean? It could have possibly been a little bit more shrewd. So it's just the margins are smaller than that. Like, do you know what I mean? I just think they're still Kilkenny. Again, maybe it's a bad scar from what they did in the noughties to teams, like, but they're still Kilkenny. Like, I see it every whole day. Like, they still have players, and as I just said to you, asking me about tactically what you see. Well, there comes a point when it still comes down to ability, and ability-wise, they're themselves and Clare are probably across the board, and ability-wise are ahead of most. Do you know, so that's what I'm saying there. I still think, and I'm not trying to give the PC answer. It's an enormous task for Limerick to get out of Munster, let alone be talking about All Ireland's in the year ahead.
Yeah, the 1 year now. Obviously, I'd like to see Limerick dethroned by Tipperary or whatever. That may not happen, but I don't really begrudge Limerick at all, because they've always had to do it the hard way coming through Munster, and their games are generally the most brilliant games to watch because teams have to go completely ball-headed to beat them. So it's just real mano-a-mano, high-intensity stuff. Like, is it as easy to watch as being someone from that county, and you're like, are you going through the emotional mill every time you watch them?
I suppose, initially, again, like, so you're so starved of success, and go back to when we'd have played, like, do you know what I mean, to win a Munster Championship game was a huge ordeal at that point in time. Again, different times. I suppose, again, it's everyone's attitude. Like, I don't go to the match roaring for Limerick. I love what they're doing. I'm obviously a Limerick person. You want them to win at all stages, but I suppose you appreciate the brilliance of what they're doing. But I also, a part of me, Shane, and again, this is individual, like, I am in awe of how they do it tactically. I am in awe of their execution skills under pressure, as I am of Clare, as I am of Tipperary. I can't, but again, like, it's like, even look back at some of those old Laker Gales, like, a part of me just I love seeing Kilkenny. All right, and again, it's why, because it's traditional hurling. There's a sense of, I suppose, the rawness of the battle between two players. Like, somebody goes out and wins their corner, whereas now, like, do you know what I mean, the centre forward scores 6 points, but the centre back had a great game. Well, sure, how can you have a great game if a man scores 6 points? But that's the nature of where the game has gone. So if I had anything on my wish list for the year, it's that teams would do, as I said there, that everyone would push up and just go for it. And, like, do you know what I mean? I suppose the return of goal scoring corner forward, that out and out, I suppose, John Fitzgerald, Jeff Fitzgibbon, John Fitzgibbon, and Kevin Hennessy of the 90s, or Pat Fox, Nicky Cormac Bonner. As in, I suppose I'd love to see the kind of goals come back into it, and like, goals create an enormous sense of excitement in the pitch. They change the atmosphere, and I suppose in a lot of the games that we have, like, it's death by 1,000 cuts with points. So as a spectator, me, irrespective of Limerick, if we had to return to some of this goal scoring, we'd really love it, like, you know.
I'd say you have to get back to class there shortly. There's just one game we didn't touch on at all. Or do you need to go right now?
You're okay for this one, yeah.
Okay. The only game we didn't touch on with Nickey earlier was Waterford against Wexford this weekend. So it's master against apprentice in a sense, because Davy was obviously manager of Wexford. Keith Rossiter was his selector. Both teams probably need a victory, because Wexford have had 3 draws. Waterford have been a bit up and down, went 10 points behind on Cork, only lost by 2 for a finish. So both teams would be keen for a win here.
Yeah, Wexford, look, again, I hope that they don't rue the missed opportunity, especially the last day. Okay, like, do you know what I mean? They've had chances to try and get over the line. Again, I suppose, look, Wexford are a team, like, there's a lot of those guys who won the Leinster 20s. They're probably coming to the peak of their career. Like Lee Chin, he's starting to come out the other side of it here now as well, like, you know. So I do think that Wexford, they're playing with the spirit of Keith Rossiter. Keith Rossiter's a really good guy. Do you know what I mean? Very well got by his own peers and the guys that are hurled against all the way up along. So they're playing with a little bit of that spirit. I suppose that may be consistency. In fairness to Darry Egan, he was very well gotten Wexford last year too. As do you know what I mean? I'm sure the players were still very sorry to see that he left. I do think that Wexford needs to really get that win. I think Waterford are a team that at this point of the year, they're actually on their level. Interesting to see, like, where's Rory O'Connor, where's Liam Ogue, where's Dee O'Keefe. They're going to be pillars for the year going forward. And if those guys come back into that setup over a couple of weeks, you know what I mean? Wexford will be still targeting to get out of Leinster, like, you know. As for probably coming forward on this, for this weekend, again, whoever loses, they're in danger of falling down the pecking. Davy probably needs it. Again, he's crippled by injuries at the moment, right? And I know he's ruining the third quarter in a lot of the recent games. Psychologically, Shane, are Waterford scarred from some of the things that have happened over the last number of years, irrespective of management and irrespective of personnel? It's a hard stick to shake. John, they've taken a couple of bad beatings, even last year, like the way it just fell apart after the Limerick game. That's hard to take, and you can do all the training you want, you can have all the psychology that you want, but ultimately it's not until you have a consistent number of big wins, i.e. more than one, that Waterford are going to get that true sense of themselves. And this is a team that are in, do you know what I mean, they're in the COVID All-Ireland, do you know what I mean, they're an excellent team. Now, where would you put them, Shane? Would you say they're 7?
I don't even know what they're trying to do, I'll be honest. Do you understand what they're trying to do?
I haven't seen him in person, right? And again, like that, I'm not an expert, right? And I think, look, I know seeing some of the clips and talking to people who've been at some of the matches, like that, the full back line rushing off up the pitch for the puck out. And I know the concession of Jack O'Connor's goal the last day, like, do you know what I mean? When you look at the angle from behind the goals, they're, oh, mother of God, there's nobody at home. Is there Davy? Is he trying to reinvent the wheel? I'm not going to throw dirt at the fella, like, you know what I mean? He's tactically, the way he thinks the game is outside is totally different to how anyone has ever thought about it, and he's got results. But maybe is it a step too far? Like, do you know what I mean? Do you wind guys up in tactics? Do you take away the natural ability? And I still come back to what I said to you originally. It comes down to the ability of the players. But if you're walking in a straitjacket of tactics, like, is he looking for the one major hit to make up for the 10 disasters? Like, that one day we're going to come out and we're going to do something that everyone's going to be raving about, but you might lose the 10 games before or after. Like, I sometimes think that. And I know Ozzy is gone and all the rest, and I know he said he needs time away from it, but it's never a good sign when you're losing top players, like, you know. And I suppose, look, it's an interesting game. Will it make or break either of the seasons? No, but again, it might make or break next year's season.
My fear is actually that it won't be a very entertaining game, that it'll be a stodgy sort of affair at Walsh Park. But look, hopefully I'm wrong on that. Niall, brilliant for you to interrupt your day's work to join us. So really, really appreciate that. And sure, hopefully we'll see you down the road soon.
God bless.
Okay, so that's brilliant to have Niall Moran on there. I'll just go through some of the other fixtures we have this weekend. So Division 2A sees Kildare against Kerry, Meath, Laois and Carlow down. And just in terms of the lay of the land in Division 2A, it's Carlow top with 3 wins from 3. Laois are second with 4 points. Then down are on 3. Kerry and Meath on 2 apiece. And you have Kildare on 1 point at the tail end of the table. Division 2B sees Roscommon against Donegal, Wicklow, Derry and London Tyrone. Again, tail of the tape and the table at the moment. Derry top with 3 wins from 3, so 6 points. Donegal, Tyrone and Roscommon are on 3, London are on 2 and Wicklow are on 1. Then moving down to the next set of fixtures, they're in 3A. Cavan are against Armagh, Sligo are against Monaghan and Mayo will do battle with Louth. So again, we'll go back to the table. Mayo top with 3 wins from 3, Sligo on 5 points. Then Cavan, Louth, Monaghan, they're on 2 apiece, so all very tight there. Armagh are bottom on 1 point. And Division 3B, Fermanagh will meet Lancashire and Longford are up against Leitrim. Once more, we'll go back to the tables there. Fermanagh, they're top with 4 points. Longford and Leitrim are on 3. Lancashire and Warwickshire are on the bottom with 1 apiece. So that's it pretty much from the show today. A reminder, if you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame. Great place to support the podcast. Also, that's it from the show. We'll be back again on Monday when Michael Verney should be back in harness. He was up to the nines today, so he couldn't make it today. But Nickey Brennan, I should say, and Niall Moran were absolutely brilliant value. So we'll chat to you again on the far side of the weekend.